Hello and welcome to the second Flying Kayak vlog. In today's Flying Kayak flying vlog, we're going to discuss a very interesting and very current topic. The topic for today's flying vlog is aviation and climate change. What does aviation mean for climate change? What does climate change mean for aviation? And how will flying change in the future? How can we make aviation more sustainable? And what is the next step in creating a world in which aviation is still going to be experienceable for future generations? In this vlog, I'm not going to talk a lot about what climate change is, why it exists, what causes climate change, and how fast or rapid climate change is actually happening. I think we can all agree on the fact that climate change is existent and that it is happening pretty fast. In fact, we only have a few years left to change something about it, or climate change may very well become irreversible. What we can also all agree on is the fact that climate change can be stopped, and the fact that aviation does play a big role in emitting greenhouse gases, which ultimately cause climate change. So aviation as it is today is probably a very big problem for the climate. The next thing that we can all agree on also is that aviation is a crucial part of a modern world. There is no way that we could live in a modern world without aviation. In fact, aviation plays a very big role in almost everyone's daily life. Even if you don't fly, you'll obviously receive packages, you'll be a part of an organization that only works because their companies are supplied with logistics that run via aviation. Long story short, aviation is one of the most important economic branches in our modern world, and aviation is the thing that the people who are probably listening to this video really like. So aviation is important, and it's important that future generations will still benefit from the incredibly good things that aviation does, and that they can experience the incredible beauty of this wonderful, wonderful thing that humans have managed to achieve, which is flying, which is an incredible feat. And it's important that this is all preserved and made sustainable. So, where are we at right now? For the past 40 years, aviation has not really changed. We're still using the same engine type, which would be jet engines and piston engines. In aviation, we're still using very similar aircraft form factors to what we had 40 years ago, and we're flying them more or less the same. There haven't been very many changes since then, since the introduction of jet airliners to the general public, and that is the leading cause of aviation being a rather dirty, in parentheses, industry. So, why is that so? At the moment, aviation is incredibly profitable the way it is. Piston engine and jet engined aircraft have more or less reached the height of their efficiency. They have been improved constantly over the years, creating sort of the ultimate jet and piston airplanes. There's not much you can do to make a modern airliner like the A320neo or the 737 MAX or a modern 777 much more efficient. They're more or less the best there is, and we won't be able to change that unless we radically change the way we fly or radically change the type of aircraft we use. So radically change the form, the wing, or the engine type of the airplane. And in fact, I believe that that is something that's going to happen in the near future. Jet aircraft and piston aircraft have really served us well. They've created aviation the way we know it today. They've been the ground stock of all the flying that's been done, and they've allowed us to build up this incredible thing that is flying. And these engines are now kind of reaching the end of their lifespan. They're going to be replaced with something different. The question is, with what are they going to be replaced? They have to be replaced with something that is sustainable and climate neutral because, well, as I already mentioned in the beginning of the video, climate change is an incredible threat to humanity and an incredible threat to all of us and our way of life and aviation. And climate change is going to happen, or it is already happening at the moment, and it's going to get worse. So we must all work in order to make sure that the climate improves again and that we can live in this world for decades to come. And that also means changing aviation the way it is. Aviation is still powered by these old engines and by fossil fuels for several reasons. First off, airlines and companies that manufacture aircraft have made incredible investments into these engine types and these fuel types. They've built giant manufacturing plants geared at creating jet engines or creating jet-powered aircraft. They've built infrastructures supporting these aircraft and these fuel types, and airports have built infrastructures supporting these aircraft and these fuel types. So switching fuel type or switching engine type is really not going to be a very easy task for them money-wise, because they've got a lot of money invested into that and they want that to pay off. And in some cases that might still take years before that investment might pay off or be profitable. So it's important to know that companies don't really have an economic incentive at the moment to move forward to new technologies. And as climate change, although it is a very big threat, is still a fairly abstract threat, as well, it's not that much noticeable at the moment. We might actually slip past the point of no return where we can reverse climate change without even noticing it, and then not changing our technology until that point or even beyond that point, because we simply don't have the economic incentive for that. That's why I strongly support, for example, greenhouse gas emission taxes or things like that, where emitting greenhouse gases will cost you, because that's the only way that we can give the economic incentive to make companies and the aviation public in general realize what a threat climate change is and actually make a change. I think that that might be one of the most important ways that we can combat climate change. Because contrary to a lot of skeptics who believe that we don't have the technology to move away from fossil fuels, or that we don't have the technology to move away from fossil fuels fast enough to support our lifestyle through that transition period, I believe that we do have the technology, and we most importantly have the know-how to move away from fossil fuels for good. In fact, for example, electric engines and hydrogen-powered planes are really already being researched on, and they're very much possible. That has been proven. And the moment that normal fossil fuels become economically unviable, I'm pretty sure that airlines and aircraft manufacturers will be very, very quick to respond to that, and we can expect such aircraft to be released within a few years, because it is possible and it has been done. That's something that I'll talk about in just a minute. The important thing that we have to realize here, though, is that aviation manufacturers won't have to make that switch immediately. There is going to be a transition period, and it might be that during that transition period, that could be 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years, flying is going to become a little bit more expensive, and it might not be something that you're going to do on domestic routes or something that you're going to do very often. And that's sad, but that's something that we have to live with if we want to make sure that aviation remains experienceable not only for us, but for our children too. Because if we don't have this short transition period, in 20 years' time or in 30 years' time, or at the very latest when fossil fuels finally run out, somewhere around 50 years from now perhaps, we won't have any flying at all. Because, well, if there's no more fossil fuels, we're not going to be able to power current aircraft at all. So there's going to be no aviation except for soaring and other non-powered types of aviation. So really, that's going to be a big issue. So we must decide if we want to have this short transition period, which, just to be frank, will probably suck for many of us. But once we've passed that, we're going to have a new type of aviation, incredibly cool new aircraft, and really will be really working towards a new and much more incredible future in aviation. Or if we don't want to have that short transition period, and then we're going to lose aviation for good in a few decades' time. Even if we don't experience that total loss, future generations will, and that would be really unfair for those generations, and it would be really sad if aviation wouldn't be continued, and if humanity would lose this incredible thing that they've managed to do just like that. So it is perhaps the greatest challenge that aviation is facing in the next few years to make sure that aviation can be experienceable for future generations. But let's just talk a bit more about that transition phase that I just mentioned. During that transition phase, aviation might get marginally more expensive and a little less available, but that doesn't mean the end of aviation, or even the end for a short period of time. Quite the contrary. Already, airlines are flying their aircraft with biofuel, and other tests and new methods of saving fuel are being employed. For example, Ryanair is advising its pilots to fly continuous descents instead of, as it would usually do, just descend for a short period of time and then level off and then descend further and level off again and then descend down to a landing. Ryanair does this in order to save fuel and thus save money, while this would also be a viable option for other airlines to save money and fuel, which would be more environmentally friendly. Perhaps continuous cruise climbs might be an answer to how we could keep aviation viable during that transition phase. And if continuous cruise climbs are not an option, then, for example, steepening ILS approaches, as Frankfurt International Airport has done, with its steepening from 3 degrees to 3.5 degrees, might reduce not only CO2 pollution, but also reduce noise pollution, which is a win-win situation for everyone living around the airport and flying and trying to be environmentally friendly. So there are several different ways that we can make sure that even during this short transition phase, aviation remains experienceable for not only people with a lot of money, but for everybody who's interested in flying. Now, but what exactly happens after that transition phase? A lot of people think that aviation is not possible with electric aircraft or other non-jet powered aircraft, and well, they're right. Current technology makes batteries way too heavy and performance of battery-powered aircraft way too low for those to be a viable option, especially for mass air travel. You won't get a 400-seat airliner flying with only electric engines, and you won't get it up to any sensible speed. Transatlantic crossings would double in time, or maybe even triple, if we had to fly with purely electric-powered airplanes. Their range would be minimal. They'd have to constantly be refueled or charged up in this case. And that obviously isn't the experience that we're looking forward in a future of aviation. But electric powered aircraft are not the only possible answer. Hydrogen powered jets have actually been tested for quite a while. Tupolev even powered a Tupolev Tu-154, a Russian mid-range jet that could be compared to the 727, for example, by Boeing, with hydrogen, liquid hydrogen. And that's pretty incredible. Now, hydrogen-powered aircraft have several very distinct advantages. Hydrogen contains much more energy than any fossil fuel does, so you wouldn't have to load as much hydrogen to receive the same range and performance as you would have to load fossil fuels. Hydrogen is obviously a lot lighter, reducing the weight of the airplane and further reducing fuel consumption. Also, hydrogen does provide a lot of power, and it works very efficiently with ramjets or other jet aircraft engines that work very efficiently at supersonic speeds. This actually makes a speculation possible that maybe in the future we'll not only see completely climate neutral aircraft with hydrogen powered jets, but we might actually see aircraft that are supersonic, so a return to Concorde or similar hydrogen powered aircraft might not make transatlantic travel times double, but rather half them. That would be pretty incredible. So, in general, there are several types of aviation that we could expect in the future. Of course, general aviation will probably work out for a long time working on piston engines or maybe hybrid engines with piston and electric engines being combined. That's very easy to see because car engines and aircraft engines in the small general aviation segment aren't all that different, and they don't even consume much more or less fuel, and that makes them very well adapted for maybe employment as hybrid engines or things like that. When fossil fuels finally run out, which is going to happen, those aircraft that are still powered by piston engines will probably be replaced by electrical engined aircraft. Electrical and battery powered aircraft are already a thing. Currently, Pipistrel, for example, produces several electric powered aircraft, and they would work wonderfully as a replacement for light training aircraft. Like, for example, the Cessna 152, maybe the Cessna 172 aircraft of that caliber would be replaced by battery-powered aircraft because those aircraft have similar range and similar performance to what can be achieved with battery-powered aircraft. Battery-powered aircraft will have several distinct advantages in this area, actually. They're much easier to maintain, so they have a lower maintenance cost, which makes aviation more accessible and cheaper for those of us who are interested in it. They'll actually be much safer, as electrical engines are much less likely to fail than piston or even jet engines, meaning that general aviation is going to be a lot safer because engine failures and the associated difficulties will become less. Also, these aircraft are generally equipped with more modern systems, more modern stall avoidance systems and weather avoidance systems, which would more or less improve pilot situational awareness and really help in increasing aviation safety. So these new aircraft are really going to be a big benefit. Also, they'll reduce the noise footprint of regional general aviation airports, especially here in Europe. The noise footprint generated by small airfields with a lot of piston and general aviation traffic is often a source of a lot of complaint from people living near the airfield. And that's why future aircraft that run almost fully electrically will actually greatly improve that noise footprint and make aviation a much more pleasurable experience, not only for those flying, but also for those on the ground close to airports. Also, electrical engines will shorten warm-up and run-up and general on-the-ground times, thus creating a lot more efficiency in general aviation and in aviation in general. But of course, battery-powered aircraft and electric engines in aircraft will have several disadvantages. Most importantly, those disadvantages will be in range and battery weight. Batteries are fairly heavy, and they have a fairly low energy density compared to other things like, for example, fossil fuels. That's a problem because you want a lot of energy in very lightweight and small space on an aircraft, and batteries cannot provide that in the way current fuels can do. Of course, battery technology is going to improve over time, especially as batteries are going to become more and more used and more required, as more and more electric vehicles are provided and more other employments for batteries, like, for example, use in personal or house heating systems will come along. Batteries are just going to improve in general. But until then, aircraft performance in electrical aircraft and piston aircraft might show a little disparity, especially when concerning climb performance, cruise speed, and of course range. But especially in that small general aviation sector, all of those things can be mitigated because, a small general aviation aircraft like a Cessna 152 or 172 that's used mainly for training purposes and leisure purposes is not really going to be an aircraft that's going to fly long range or transatlantic, and it's probably going to be very easy to operate. Switchable batteries, for example, with batteries charging whilst you're flying on the ground, and then you return and you change your batteries and you do the next flight, would be incredibly good things, for example, for flight schools, reducing fuel costs, incredibly making training much cheaper. And of course, you could just have a lesson with one student and the batteries are charging up for the lesson with the next student on the ground, and then you're just going to switch out the battery, charge the one you used for the last student, and so on and so forth. So you're going to have a lot of advantages there. But especially in the airline industry or in a general aviation area where you'll have a bit more commercial-oriented general aviation, for example, private jets or private aircraft that are used for people who want to travel for business in their aircraft, for example, is of course really gonna have to search for a very different option. Because private aircraft such as, for example, the Pilatus PC-12 or the Cessna Citation series or, Piper Malibu series, which are more or less small airplanes that are used by people who want to travel around fast for business or sometimes even for pleasure, they'll have a big problem because they cannot rely on battery-powered aircraft. So they'll need something in the direction of hydrogen jets or light natural gas jets, which work a lot better and with a lot lower emissions or zero emissions, actually, in the case of hydrogen jets, and that really would allow for a lot more performance, especially range-wise. Now, also, you could power hydrogen-powered aircraft with a fuel cell powering a propeller, which would provide something that could replace the high-performance piston area. For example, the Piper M-series aircraft or Mooney aircraft that are used for flying around at high speed in piston aircraft. So that's all possible. And then in the airline industry, you'll probably mostly be relying on hydrogen jets. Hydrogen jets will greatly reduce fuel costs for airline industry, actually, meaning that we might see cheaper tickets in the future. They'll probably allow for supersonic flights on long-haul routes, so transatlantic supersonic flights, trans-Pacific supersonic flights, which is going to be incredible because that means that we're really going to cut down on travel times. We're going to have incredibly cool new aircraft, and in general, the aviation landscape is going to change because now you're not going to take 4 hours or 8 hours to go on intercontinental flights, but rather you're going to take 2 to 3 hours, which is going to be incredible. Imagine getting from London to New York in 2.5 hours. We've already had that once with Concorde, but that wasn't really very environmentally friendly. But we're going to have it again, hopefully with hydrogen-powered aircraft. That's going to be an incredible advantage, an incredible upside to this. And in general, we'll really have to work on that. So, is aviation still going to exist 30 or 40 or 50 years from now? Yes, of course. Aviation is one of the most incredible things that humans have achieved. We've actually managed to fulfill our probably lifelong dream of flying. Many people want to fly, and every kid dreams of having wings. And with aircraft, for the first time in human history, we've managed that. And it would be an incredible shame if this all goes to waste, just because we cannot move on from piston engines. Piston engines, like many incredible technologies of the past, have done us a great service. They've worked for a long time, and they've really built up an incredible base that we have now. And that base is going to help propel us into future technologies. And that's why, just as we said bye to steam engines, we'll just have to say, okay, piston engines or jet engines that burn fossil fuels, your time has come. You've done something really cool, and now we got to move on to something even cooler. Because although we'll then lack modern aircraft type like the 737 or the 777, which are incredibly cool, we'll gain new and even cooler aircraft types. We'll see some real progress and some real change and some exciting new things in aviation. Supersonic hydrogen jets. I mean, that sounds like you'd take it straight from a Star Trek movie, and that is incredible. And I hope that we'll manage to make that jump. I hope the policies will change so that we can manage that jump to new and exciting technologies before we reach the point of no return. And that we can make sure that future generations can not only enjoy an incredible world and an incredible nature surrounding them, but that they can also enjoy something incredible like aviation, that they can have incredible fun flying around, and that they will share our passion just as we do right now. Thanks for listening and bearing with me throughout this rather long vlog. The next vlog, I assume, will be on the topic of flight deck automation and the benefits and disadvantages it has for pilots in the cockpit. And I'll see you again as soon as possible. Also, the next full flight video will be an Embraer E175 or 95, I'm not sure yet, flying from Frankfurt to Amsterdam, which will be a KLM City Hopper flight. So stay tuned for that. I hope that I can greatly increase the audio and video quality of that Embraer flight over the last full flight video with the 737-700. Safe travels, blue skies, and many happy landings to you.